all the districts that are represented here, we all have great staffs, and we're so thankful for our public educators. And we couldn't do what we do without the staffs that we have in our building. So we are so thankful for each of our public educators that we have in our building. So thanks for being here tonight. And I want to introduce Ms. Chelsea Crawford from TDOE, Chief of Staff with the department. And thank you for being here tonight and giving us your input for accountability. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Worley. And I will second thanks to Miss Betsy for this delightful surprise. Teaching for 50 years and being around in the system is definitely an act of service that we appreciate. I know we all appreciate the sugar. This is the tastiest town hall we've had so far, so thank you. All right, well, we are here tonight. I want to thank you all for coming because we all want to talk about a very important topic, which is a piece of legislation we're going to implement for the very first time later this fall. As Director Worley said, my name is Chelsea Crawford. Before we get into it, I just want to thank you all again for hosting us. Thank you all for giving some of your time up this afternoon to come and engage with us and take part in this discussion and conversation. This is officially the 5th of 10 town halls that the department is hosting all across the state. So we've kind of met the halfway point at the end of this evening. And what we're doing is going around to hear from Tennesseans like you about, as I said, this piece of legislation that we will implement for the very first time. And so the way that this evening will work is I'm going to give just a very brief presentation that will kind of provide some baseline information so that everyone can participate in the discussion. But the real reality is that we're here to hear from you. And so the majority of the time we're going to ask you to come up and tell us how you feel and what your input, what your preferences, priorities, perspectives might be. As we go through the presentation, I want to click on to the first slide so that we can go ahead and get started. And just first and foremost want to say that at the agency, and I know certainly at school districts and schools all across the state, our goal is to provide children with a high quality education and give them the best possible opportunities that we can to support them in being successful after they graduate high school, no matter what pathway they pick. And so that's where we are grounding kind of the basis of everything that we do and grounding our conversation in that goal. But as I mentioned, we are here to talk about a very specific component of the state's legislation and requirements for the department to implement a letter grade system for schools. And what that means is just like you see students bring home report cards that have an A, B, C, D, F letter grade, the same type of rating scale will be applied for schools later this fall. So again, as I mentioned, why you are here tonight is really to help us co-create, to discuss, to contribute to the conversation about how do we go about building a rating system for schools in this as we implement this legislation. When we signed in this afternoon, and up here on the slide, you'll see a QR code. That is the way that you can go ahead and sign up. If you already know that you've got something that you want to say and contribute to the discussion, you can feel free to scan that QR code on any of the slides to sign up. Or if you would like to speak, you can also just raise your hand. We will bring a microphone to you before you start, just so everyone can hear what you're saying and kind of contribute to the discussion. So let's go on to the next slide. I mentioned that this is the first time we are implementing a piece of legislation. It was actually passed a number of years ago, and so this one's kind of been sitting on the shelf, and for a number of years since that legislation was passed, we have not yet been able to implement it, really because a lot of the data that would go into a rating system like this was kind of held off limits. When we think about that 2018 period, that is when the 17-18 school year is when this legislation should have been implemented for the first time. You all might remember that there were some testing administration issues that prevented the use of assessment data for certain purposes. We fast forward the timeline a little bit, and then we all remember the COVID-19 pandemic. Similarly, in that time frame, data was off limits in terms of use for a rating system like this. This year, there is no data that is off limits, and so we are now ready to move forward to implement that legislation. And you see over here on the far right side of the slide, the timeline for implementation, which is 2023. Really, it's this fall. The state report card is kind of an annual release of information that the department does every year. The state report card is a website, and it gives lots of information about our schools and about their students and about their staff. That is going to be what will house or home or present the information related to the A, B, C, D, or F letter grade system. So in November of this year, we will see on the state report card for all schools in Tennessee that letter grade system. And it will say A, B, C, D, or F associated with an individual school. If we go forward to the next slide, I wanted to provide just some examples of the types of things that we want to hear from you about. This list is not comprehensive. There are lots of other things that we can consider, but I want to point out a couple pieces on this slide in particular. I mentioned this is a piece of legislation that we are implementing. That means it's in state law. And when you go and read the language of the law, there are two components. They're up on the top left side of your screen that must be included in the calculation that generates A through F letter grades. The first is proficiency. And so when we think about what our children learn in schools, whether it's in math or English or science, Tennessee teachers come together and develop rigorous academic standards on what we would expect a student in a particular grade would know in a particular subject matter area. Proficiency is whether they are meeting. Proficiency is the measure of whether those students are actually achieving and on track to meet expectations or exceed expectations in terms of demonstrating knowledge of those standards. Proficiency is one component that is required to be included in this calculation. So we know that the legislation calls that proficiency must be included. The second component I'll point out to you is growth. That is another component that the legislation requires must be included. Growth is a little bit different than proficiency, and really what it's measuring is the amount of improvement, the rate of improvement that a school would make. Students get growth scores. Schools also get growth scores. We know that growth must be included in the legislation. There's a third bullet point in the language of the law that says other indicators can be included in the calculation that generates an A, B, C, D, or F letter grade for each school. We want to talk a lot about proficiency and growth and what those other indicators could or should be. When you look down at the bottom left-hand side of this slide, you'll see a couple examples of what other indicators have been talked about in the past as it relates not only to this calculation, but other kind of measures of school performance. Chronically out of school is one that you see up here that's really related to absenteeism. When children are not in the classroom with their wonderful teacher, it's going to be really hard for them to absorb the learning, the skills, the knowledge that their teachers are kind of giving. English language proficiency is another example that we've talked about previously. When we think about students who are English learners and they're just now mastering the English language, that could definitely have an impact on their ability to access content knowledge when we think about the lessons that we learn in school. And so we talk about considerations that we can make for schools with high populations of English learners. When we get over here on the right-hand side, we've got some other examples, and I really want to push us tonight to think about other indicators that might apply in an elementary school space versus a middle school space versus a high school space. On the right-hand side, you see two examples of things we talk about a lot when it comes to high school readiness and indicators of success there. You see graduation rate. Of course, that's important for all of us. I know when you send your child to school, the hope and the expectation is that they will graduate 12th grade and move on to their next step in life and be ready to be successful, no matter if they're going to college, going to a career, military, or some other pathway. Ready graduate is an additional indicator, an example of the kinds of things that we want to hear about tonight. Ready graduate is really a measure that's supposed to indicate how ready a student is to enter that secondary, post-secondary world after they graduate high school and be successful. So those are two examples of indicators that could potentially be included in the calculation for a letter grade system. Let's think about what other examples or other indicators could be at a high school level, but not only the high school level, elementary level and middle school levels as well. So we're going to come back to this slide just to kind of give us an a menu, I guess, of potential options. This is, again, not comprehensive. There are lots of other things that can be considered. And that's what we want to hear from you about tonight. So we'll go on to the next slide, and this is really going to move us into the public comment component of tonight's meeting. When we think about generating public comment, right? When we ask you what we want, what your opinions are, what your perspectives are, what your preferences are, we want to give you some questions, kind of prompts to guide your thinking. When we think about top priorities for measuring a school's success, academic success, again, I mentioned that later this fall you will see on that website, ABC Elementary, and it will have next to it, associated with it, some letter grade. When a parent or a family member sees an A or a B or a C, D, or F, what are the assumptions that they might make behind that letter grade? We want to think through tonight, what should that letter grade actually represent when we're thinking about a rating scale that is intended to communicate with parents and families? Another way to think about it, how do we measure progress? How do we prioritize amongst the components of a calculation, the sub-indicators, if you will? Does one matter more to us than the other? We want to hear your input on that. How would you define what each school should provide to students to receive each grade, right? When we think about supporting individual students and their own learning and their own success, we come in and wrap our arms around our students and make sure that we can meet them wherever they are and help them move on and improve to the next level. That's the same kind of thinking that we have at the agency about this letter grade system. When we apply letter grades to schools, then what happens? What are we going to do as a state agency to support schools that may need additional support? So these are some of the types of prompts or questions that you could ask yourself. There are probably lots more ways to think about this conversation, but this is just to get the conversation primed and started. So from here, we're going to move into our public comment period of the event. The way that this will work, as I mentioned, you've got the QR code. You can also just raise your hand. We will bring a microphone just so that everybody can hear. But you'll have a couple minutes to say your input, and you can say as many things tonight as you would like. You are not limited to one comment. You can iterate. You can kind of build upon a discussion. You can ask questions that we can take back to consider. So really want to make sure that we provide everybody as much opportunity to do that as we can. I will start a timer up here, and it will go off just so that we can all kind of understand how we're doing in terms of time and taking turns, as we like to say. What I will do is I will start the timer. You will state your name, provide your input. I will step away from the podium when your timer starts. And as the timer starts clicking down, you'll have about 30 seconds left. I'm going to step back up to the podium, and that's kind of my visual signal, my visual cue for you that your time is just about to end, and the next person behind you will be ready to begin. But again, as I mentioned, you can provide as much comment as you would like. So with that, I think we can go ahead and move to opening public comment. To get us started tonight, I will look for someone to raise their hand in the audience while we pull up the file that includes some of the signups already, and I know we've got some signups in writing here. Looks like first up is Eddie Pruitt. I see you sitting right here in the front, sir. We're going to bring you a microphone. I am going to start my timer. If you would, just state your name and go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Okay, Eddie Pruitt, Director of Schools, Gibson County Special School District. So when we think about, I want to talk first the path that was used to build A through F. You know, that was passed in 2016, I think, and I believe it was a 1 to 2 year process to actually come up with the formula that we're using right now. We haven't been able to use it to get letter grades, but all schools have been familiar with that formula, and we've been anticipating using that formula. And a single letter grade, when we went through that process, a lot of discussion was about using a single letter grade to say everything about a school, because there's limitations with one letter grade, because it can hide strengths and it can hide some weaknesses. So that was probably the biggest heartburn that most educators had, is, you know, that one single grade. Our preference was to have all the grades. So a parent, we want all parents to have informed decisions. If a parent really wants to focus on achievement, then have all of that listed out so that it's not, because the fear is that one single letter grade and they stop looking. So we would rather have, I would rather have more access to all the data, even though I know that's not really going to happen because we have to have a single letter grade, but I did want to share that. And I think everybody here will agree that's, all of our educators want to do what's best for kids, and accountability is nothing that I shy away from and nothing that any of our teachers shy away from, because they want to be accountable for what's happening with our students. When the department built that, there was a lot of stakeholder involvement. The fear is right now is that we're trying to build something in a matter of a month, and it's on data that's already happened. That doesn't seem fair to me, and I don't think that it's fair for our educators. It's not fair for our schools to have a letter grade for data from last year on a formula that hasn't even been built. It just doesn't seem ethical to me. What I would suggest is use the current formula for this year, and then use this time, just like in the past, use this time. If there is a need to build, then let's rebuild something, but let's use this time productively to try to focus on what is important. From my perspective, I think achievement is important. There needs to be an absolute achievement, but there also needs to have for a school that is very low, they may not be able to hit that absolute achievement, but if they're showing, 5% increase this year, 10% increase the next year, you have to show some success for those schools, or else those teachers and students are just going to be deflated. And I think there has to be something in there dealing with our AMOs and that pathway. And growth with value added, again, is something that we've had in Tennessee for a long time, and it's still embargoed, but I know very many districts are really excited to share, because that means a lot to us, and it means a lot to our teachers, because it shows all of the hard work that they did throughout the year. And so that's my feedback.
Thank you very much for your comment, Director Pruitt. I appreciate the comments that you just made. And you, I think, really explained well kind of the proficiency growth components that we were talking about earlier. So I appreciate you kind of elevating that and putting a spotlight on the importance of both of those things. You talked about timing. Yes, timing is very tight. And I know one of the things I've heard along the way as I've done 5 of these other town halls was, well, we know that you already know what you want to do. Why don't you just show us what it is? And we don't. There was a lot of work done a number of years ago, and it was a lot of years ago. And so we want to take this moment to make sure that the A through F letter grade system, when it is implemented for the very first time, that it can be done as fair as possible. So appreciate that, and appreciate you kind of being here to help co-create with us. Others who want to provide some input about this topic, either about the proficiency, growth components, what those other indicators could or should be. I'm interested to hear from you. Yes, sir, I see you right here. We're going to bring you a microphone. Just state your name. Go ahead, get started when you're ready.
My name is Woody Burton. I'm the Director of Schools in Lake County. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk. I want to add to what Eddie was talking about. I don't know what the actual balance, what you're considering the difference between proficiency and growth. But I remember 15 years ago, Dr. Trudy Day was with TDOE at the time, and she told us that the research said that achievement is influenced by socioeconomics. Growth is influenced by the impact of a classroom teacher. So control the controllables, influence the variables. So for someone, a county, the poorest county in the state of Tennessee, when you think about socioeconomics, we got to focus on that growth. What can we control? And in my mind, again, I'm all about the accountability. As educators, we have to be accountable to the data. That's fair. But what I'm saying is as all of this plays out in the formula, however it is, in our minds, to make it fair, equitable, it should be a 50-50 split between the achievement and growth. If we're going to have the ability to show what our teachers can do with explicit direct instruction to be able to get the most out of what we have to have growth to be just as important as achievement. Oh, and just, thank you. I want to add this. TVAS on the TDOA website, there's frequently asked questions. Number 3 on there, it gives explicit examples of how high-performing students can grow just as much as any other student. So I'd hate to see there be any contradiction of that and a formula gets created thinking that you can't grow students who already have high achievement. That would be a contradictory message to what we have been told for years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. I appreciate that. And your comments are actually aligned to something we heard at a town hall earlier this week, which is related to the controllable factors and what are some of the things that we know we can control in a classroom or a schoolhouse community, and how could those controllable things be represented potentially in an A through F calculation. So thank you very much for your comments. Others who want to chime in, feel free to raise your hand. I know this is a topic that is very important to all of us, and when we think about that letter grade system and kind of what parents and community members, taxpayers will see later this fall, we're interested to hear from you about what are the components that letter grade should or could represent. Others who want to contribute, feel free to raise your hand. We'll bring the microphone to you. 2 of them over here. I saw you in the back first, ma'am, with the short sleeves, and then we'll come to you, Director Worley, next. When you get the microphone, if you would please just state your name, and I'll start your timer when you start.
I'm Camilla Rogers, and I'm the principal at Dyersburg High School. And I've been around for a long time. And I was around in 2016 whenever all of that was talked about. I was an instructional supervisor then, and I'm the principal now. So whenever thinking about a high school and our EOC subjects, the kids that take them are very young, and the end goal, that's still a long way away. What I have noticed in the 15 years that I've been at the high school is as they get closer to the end goal and they take that junior ACT and then the senior ACT, we catch those kids up, and the EOC is not reflective of what ends up happening with our kids at Dyersburg High School. So my thing that I would like for you to consider, how should the state measure progress towards these priorities at the high school level, is considering the ACT, which you guys are already partnered with, that does have a math test and an English test. The other part of that is that I'm a mom too, and I'm a mom of a high school student. So getting everybody on board, teachers and students and parents, about a test that matters and reflects college and career readiness. So I just wanted to share that with the group.
Thank you very much. Very thoughtful comments. I appreciate that, Ms. Rogers. We're going to Director Kim Worley next. If you would please state your name, and I'll start your timer when you start, ma'am.
Well, my name is Kim Worley, Director of Schools with Dyersburg City Schools, and I didn't know if Ms. Rogers might have stolen some of what I was going to say. But I was also going to talk about high school accountability and looking at that accountability model with 30% coming from achievement. And as it stands right now, 30% of that achievement is coming directly from just Algebra 1 and English 10. And with many small schools in this area, that could be reflective of just 2 teachers in the building. And there are many great things that happen in a high school. And that should, 30% of that plus their growth score, so it's really more than 30%, that should not be reflective of just what happens with 2 teachers in a building. So I think that we've got to look at how do we distribute that and how do we reflect a score among more teachers, and how do we reflect that of what is really happening in a school.
Thank you very much for that comment, Director Worley. Consistent, again, with some other things that we've heard along the way of these town halls, and not just kind of the one subject matter area as it relates to English or math, but what about all the other subjects? What about science? What about social studies? We even heard last night about some of the fine arts as an example, and whether those things could be included or should be included. So I appreciate your very thoughtful comment. Others who want to chime in? Other thoughts that we have? Yes, ma'am, we're going to bring a microphone to you in the back. And when the microphone gets to you, if you would state your name. I'll start your timer.
I'm Norma Gerald. I'm superintendent in Paris Special School District. One of the questions and concerns that I have is how this applies to our ESEA plan that has already been approved by the federal government, which would, in my mind, already have a formula that was created in 1718. So how can we create a new plan or a new formula in a plan that hasn't been approved by the federal government? And contrary to what anybody in Nashville is thinking, we can't do without our federal money. So we really need to make sure that we have everything in line. In Northwest Tennessee, there are 40,000 students total in 23 school districts. We look at our next door neighbor at Clarksville, Montgomery County, and you're looking at 55,000 students in one district. It's different, and it needs to be considered. Poverty schools, high poverty schools need to be given opportunities that we have what we have. Also, I'm not sure how this correlates effectively with our teachers' level of effectiveness scores. They're 50% evaluation, 35% growth, and 15% achievement. So if, as a teacher, I'm only responsible for 15%, and that's based on normally something other than TN Ready, how am I helping toward the achievement if we go with a 50-50 split? We need to align those things if they're not, if we're going in that direction. And also, when we're thinking about opportunities that the state has given to middle schools in particular, if we've taken advantage of career technical education in our middle schools, points should be given toward that. So there are, in my mind, a way to have a point system in addition to your achievement and your value added or your growth. And we have been, this is my 35th year in education in the state of Tennessee, all in West Tennessee. We have been flying the plane not built since about 2012. And our folks are getting weary of doing that, and we need to be ready, and we need to be encouraging as we go. Our folks are tired, and we need to make sure that we're putting our teachers on a pedestal, and we are thankful for them, and we are encouraging them and lifting them up and not giving them one more thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gerald, for those comments. You packed a lot in those few minutes. I appreciate that. Very thoughtful. I do want to pull out a couple of things that you mentioned because I want to just comment. We've heard, I think, from another comment this evening about kind of the comparison, and are we comparing apples to apples, or, as was said in a different town hall, apples to oranges, tangerines to bananas to grapes. And so I think that was particularly interesting. But the concept of bonus points or bonus bucks, I think, is the way someone referred to them last night. You mentioned CTE in middle school. There was another idea about tutoring and kind of students who persist through tutoring services. Could or should that generate something in this A through F calculation? So thank you for all the things that you said, but I wanted to pin those two in particular because it is consistent with some of the other things that we've heard. Other comments, folks who want to chime in? Other thoughts? I appreciate how many directors of schools have shown up tonight. Yes, sir, we see you here in the blue shirt, and then I see you here, Director Black. We'll come to you next. If you would, please, sir, state your name. Go ahead, get started when you're ready.
Hi, my name's Lynn Garner. I'm the principal of a middle school. This is my 32nd year in education, but we recently went through STEM designation, probably the most rigorous assessment of a school of anything that I've been through. Very difficult. I know the governor's pushing CTE and STEM, and like she said, we're a STEM designated school. We've went through all the things that require, and very difficult process, let's put it that way. And we feel like that should be given consideration as well in the school grade. Just the difficulty and the rigor and all that was in that. I don't know if everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about or went through the process, but it is very rigorous process to go through, and it takes a total commitment from the entire staff based on careers, project-based learning, all those things. And really, they didn't just look at our STEM program, they looked at the entire school environment as well. So I just feel like from our school that we feel like that should be considered and as well. All right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gardner. That was very thoughtful. We're going next, Nia. It's going to be 2 rows in front of you here. Director Black, we're bringing the microphone to you.
I probably don't need one.
You probably got your teacher voice, huh? If you would, please, sir, just state your name. Go ahead and get started.
I'm Dan Black, Superintendent of Schools at Bradford. I think what we're trying to do is great. I think all of us in here appreciate success. We appreciate kids working hard. But if I was teaching a class and the kids came in there and they didn't know what they were going to be judged on until the class was over, I wouldn't stay very long. I mean, if I was superintendent and I had a teacher doing that, we'd have to have a talk. And it looks like that's what we're doing here. We're going to be measured on something that hasn't been established yet. Why would we not set the standards and then next year we see how to do that? That's my question. We're not going to get an accurate, I don't think, interpretation of actually what's going on until everybody knows what we're going to be measured with.
Thank you very much, sir, for your comment. Additional folks who want to chime in this evening. I see you way over here. Nia, we're getting a workout tonight. I appreciate how many folks are chiming in. Y'all are very, we've got a good discussion going, and I appreciate it deeply.
Hello, thank you. My name is Preston Caldwell. I am superintendent at West Carroll. Thank you for allowing me to talk with you. 1998, I'm in my 26th year in education. In 1998, I came out of college. I had no teaching experience. I had no class at all to prepare me. And I started teaching. I taught on what was then called a waiver. And it was very, very difficult for me because I had to learn how to teach as I was teaching. I'm in my 3rd year now as superintendent. We have a national shortage of teachers. It is unbelievable. We have so many, and especially at West Carroll, I mean, we have 10% of our teachers that are on a permit. So we have these inexperienced teachers that now, for some urgent reason, they're going to be assigned a grade. It just, to me, it doesn't seem fair. We need our teachers. We need them to learn and know how to teach. And I love what Eddie Pruitt said. I love putting it on the back burner and figuring this out. Take a year and set the standards like Mr. Black said, and then come back and revisit it. Again, thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much for your comments, Director Caldwell. Others who would like to contribute? Nia, right next to you. That was perfect. Yes, sir. Please state your name. Go ahead and get started.
My name is Carlton Gerald, and my opinions are not hers. She doesn't believe, so I'll caveat that. I didn't come over here to talk, but both my parents were teachers. I grew up in a home with both parents being teachers, had my parents. I've lived now with her, and I've watched this education thing, and I'm speaking as a person, a community person. And if I get kind of frank, I apologize. This is a disaster. And I'm going to tell you why. If you're in a community and this school's got an F and this school's got an A, where do you think everybody's going to run to? It just looks like we're creating something else that's going to constantly tear down. I'm all about accountability. You can ask her, anybody that knows me from a community. I used to be the mayor of Paris. That what is going on here is, I just can't see it being any kind of good public relations for the state of Tennessee, education and teachers in any form or fashion. Because it's just like when I was a kid and I was, oh, we were grouped then. I was in A group. What'd we do to the D and F group? We made fun of them. The D stands for the dumb. The F stands for the flunkies. And I think that public perception, because the public doesn't understand public education. They don't understand it. It's complicated. I hear it every night, and I don't understand it half the time. Y'all been here, your guides and your grades and your ups and your downs and your quotas and your ELA, all these terms and codes. You got to have a code book to understand. And we're not even understanding when the scores come out, the papers can't even report on them. You're already judging people by their growth and all these other things, and we're going to put one more thing on there that's going to just, to me, we're killing public education in the state of Tennessee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gerald, for your comments. Very, very thoughtful. Others who'd like to chime in, feel free to raise your, Nia, right, just past where you were. If you would state your name, ma'am, go ahead and get started.
Cheryl Mathis with Dyer County Schools, and I want to touch on really what several of the others have said. I have to start with Eddie on this one letter grade for everything. We don't do that for our students. We don't take their report card and average their grades or come up with a formula and say, oh, you have an A in this, but you have 4 F's in this, so you're not, I don't want anybody to see that A, so you're not going to really get much recognition for that. We don't do it for our students. I don't think we should do it for our schools. And I have to think about the perception of it. We have our teacher evaluation system, and a level of effectiveness of a 3, we have been told. How many times have we been told? What's a 3? Rock solid teaching. Is a 3 really acceptable to any teacher? Let me tell you, it's not. And it's not because a teacher wants to be the top. She wants her students to be the top. The community wants the students and the school to be the top. But then you look at our TVAS when it comes in, and we have 2 teachers who teach the same grade. They're both growth score of a 3. In our school growth score, the kids were a 5. The same group of kids where the teacher drew a 3, the 2 teachers drew a 3, and the kids are a 5. And then how do you explain that? It doesn't make sense. We need something that's logical. We need something that, if we're going to use this system, it needs to be a true perception of what our system is about, not that, 3 is rock solid teaching, gonna pat around the head. No. It's either it really is good or it's not, but we need to just make sure that the perception is out there, that we get the credit for what we really are, whether it's good, whether it's bad, and let's look at more than one overall score for that. I think, too, we need to look, and I don't know how this would be done, but as we're looking at ways to do this, we want to look at our community needs and how are we addressing the needs of our community. We talk about different CTE courses. You take this and you get this much funding for it. Well, it doesn't matter what I've told, and unless this has been changed through, and anybody feel free to correct me, but certain programs, because it's a statewide need, you get more funding, whether it's that need in your community or not. I think we need to look at the needs of our community, and are we fulfilling the needs of our community? Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mathis. I've heard a couple of comments tonight kind of about all the stuff, right? We got a lot of laws that say we need to measure and we need to label and all of these kind of things, and are there actual alignment between those evaluation systems? So I appreciate kind of pulling that one out in particular. Others who have comments tonight, questions, considerations? Yes, ma'am, I see you there with the blue shirt. If you would please state your name, go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Catherine Korth, the Chief Accountability Officer from Jackson-Madison County Schools. And I kind of thought I knew what I wanted to say, but I've liked hearing some of the different comments people have said today, and feel like I'm open to some new ideas after hearing that. But I'm going to go back to that this is not new legislation. At this time last year, I spent a lot of time going into schools and helping them understand their test results and understand all their data that has come in. And at this time last year, I was meeting with schools on a daily basis talking through that we're not getting letter grades this year, but next year they're going to be coming. And this is what your data would have looked like, and this is your way to an A. And I feel like our schools this year were approaching the school year knowing what I called their way to an A. And I think it's very not a good idea to change that after the year is over when they all went in with that expectations. Our ESL teacher can tell you that 60% meeting growth expectations was their way to an A with ESL. They can speak that language. And so I just think it's very important, Mr. Pruitt hit it right with his very first comment, that now's the time to come up with new ideas for perhaps moving forward, but not for this year, not when people already knew what the expectations were. I want to highlight a couple of things that I like about the current system. One of them was the multiple ways to an A, where you could either meet an AMO or you could have an absolute metric for that. I hope we'll preserve that. We have a very diverse school system. We have priority schools in our school system, and then we have some of the highest achieving schools in our school system, in the state in our school system. And having both of those groups have a way to be successful is very, very important. Growth is very important for some of our lower socioeconomic schools, and I want to make sure that that gets preserved in it. The other thing I want to speak of is I'm just very, very concerned about high school accountability right now. We opened 2 new schools in the midst of all of this. We have math scores that belong to one school and English scores that belong to another school, and so some are getting thrown out and they don't count for anybody. We had 99% participation on our assessments, but we're going to miss our participation rates. High school right now, I'm just so concerned about where we are with that, and I'm just very concerned for our schools that I couldn't even explain to them what that would mean until they have a chance to understand this new accountability model. High schools are probably my biggest concern.
Thank you very much for your comments, ma'am. Right on time, actually. And you too, I think we're craving a lot into these few minutes per person. Thank you all for that thoughtfulness. Other folks who want to chime in, contribute something for consideration, please feel free to raise your hand. I think I'm the one messing up the microphone over here. Others who'd like to provide some comment. Yes, sir. We're going to bring you a microphone, Director. Just state your name and get started when you're ready.
Jonathan Criswell, Director of Schools for Milan Special School District. First of all, thank you for being the face of this. You know, the directors in this room appreciate you, and I know that's not an easy task, and all of us would have you work for us without blinking an eye. We believe in you for sure. My biggest concern is that we're eroding trust in public education. When we look at the unknown and the things that change, I don't know how you're going to be able to pull this off and not erode trust. Once you know the score and then you go back and figure out the rules, there's really no way to come out of this with people believing that that's not manipulated. Whether it is or it's not, I don't know the perception. And again, that erodes trust. So in Milan, we're about to celebrate like we're Oprah giving away cars. Everybody gets a 5, okay? And so if I have to come back in 2 months and go, oh, by the way, but you're a C or a B or whatever, I don't even know how it would come out. But if it doesn't align to what we're about to celebrate, I've just eroded the trust from the public to the schools to the data, the teachers to the data. All of that just erodes. And if we create a system that's predictable by color of a student's skin, the voting pattern of the people in that district, or socioeconomic status, if we create something that you can predict, we've eroded trust in public education. And I just think public education is the backbone of our communities. And ultimately, that's my biggest concern coming out of this, is that we are about to erode the trust even deeper than what it is right now.
Thank you very much for your comments, Director Criswell. Others who would like to chime in? Let's think about some of those indicators. You know, I mentioned earlier on kind of the elementary versus the middle of the high school. We've talked a little bit about high school tonight. I'm interested to know if there are things we think about in a letter grade system. When we think about an elementary school versus a middle school versus a high school, are there ideas about the kinds of things that we could look at to give credit to, right, when we think about what's going on in an elementary school or a middle school? Thinking about subgroups of students even, just like we have up here on that other slide, the English language proficiency. Just trying to prompt some additional thoughts for you all. Folks who want to chime in? I think it is me with this microphone. Yes, ma'am, we're going to bring you a mic.
I'm only speaking because my team spoke.
All right, come on, join the party. If you would start, state your name, go ahead and get started when you're ready.
I'm Janice Epperson. I am superintendent for Humboldt City Schools, which I am a proud Viking for life. I graduated from there. My parents raised me there. The community expect big things, like you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. I just have a concern that if the schools make the community, we've got to figure out how to get the community to understand this foolishness, because that's what it is to me. I wake up in the morning and I can't remember things like, what is the formula? What is this going to be? How is this going to go? Then you go and you talk to teachers, and kind of like someone said, you know, you're doing really good, doing well, kids are growing. Maybe we're not getting the achievement, like people have said tonight. Maybe we're not getting the achievement. But for you to not count growth as equally important as achievement, I just can't understand that. Because if we tell a child or we tell a teacher, especially the teachers who are not education majors, we just want you to give them 1 year of growth this year. They deserve that. Every child deserves that. They may come to you already below grade level, 2, 3 years, some of them 4. But it is still your responsibility to give them 1 year growth, and to tell them that they're not gonna be appreciated for that or celebrated for that. And then we get the F or we get the D, and then my buddies over here, they get the A's and they get the B's. Then my community, we're so low socioeconomically, they don't always understand that. So then I gotta go out and I gotta try to figure out how to get them to understand that. And no matter what I say, when the newspaper publish it, that's what they're gonna get. They don't care that we had this group to come up. They don't understand subgroups. Heck, I don't understand all of them myself. They don't understand that this kid is in this group and in this group and in this group. So they're hitting you 3 and 4 different ways versus just one way. All they know is when they wake up and this comes out, I get the phone calls. We already have a flight of students leaving after elementary school because they don't want to come to the junior senior high school. How many are gonna leave now? The enrollments are down in our little bitty rural areas. You guys, it's your responsibility, and Chelsea, you know I love you, and I'm talking holistically. It's the state's responsibility to help us keep these teachers in the building. I don't know where you go to graduation ceremonies in college, but they're not graduating 35 people in the School of Education anymore. So we're at McDonald's hiring kids with a bachelor's degree, literally, did we not? We go pick up some lunch and there's a girl there, I said, hey, she's a 4 this year. She's not even an education major, she was a 4 on her TVAS this year. We're trying to recruit, and really it's slim picking. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are very few. You've got to figure out how to help us keep these people. I fired a math teacher Friday. Dummy? Dumb. Okay? Where am I going to get one from? So you have to make a decision. Do you morally make this decision, or do you keep somebody for something else? We've got to figure out how to make these people feel appreciated, who are working their tails off. And if you tell me that I'm supposed to grow a child, then you give me credit for that. And you let the newspaper show that. So if I'm like Eddie, is it a grade here, grade here, grade here? I don't know what that looks like. All I know is that the percentage of teachers that we have are not education majors, and they're working their tails off. I don't think any of them come to school every morning saying, what can I do to be an F? They're coming trying to be a strong A, B, C. I'll take a D some days. I just ask that you guys reconsider this. It makes no sense to us, and between all of us, we've spent a lot of money on degrees in this room, and this makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me. Don't change the game after the game is, don't change the outcome of what you expect after the game has already been played. That's just how I am. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Epperson. I appreciate those comments. I see you back here, yes, sir, in the teal shirt. If you wouldn't mind, just say your name one more time, sir.
Lynn Garner, I'm a principal. The one thing that concerns me too, and we all, at my school, I have a lot of economically disadvantaged kids. I've got 16% of my kids have disabilities. So I understand the achievement part, but let's look at the far end. What if you have a gifted child? And a lot of people will ignore those kids and say, hey, they're gonna be fine, they're gonna achieve, they're super smart, they're gonna achieve, we don't have to worry about them either. If growth is not important. It has to be important on both ends and every child. So even at that end, I would be terrified having a child today that's gifted in school, because why would the teacher just not put him over here and work with, if achievement's the only goal, we've got to get these kids to this mark. And so I think even your gifted children and your high achieving children need to grow. And we can't forget those kids either. And I think everybody loses across the scale when all we worry about is just achievement and not growth. That's just my opinion about that too.
Thank you very much for those comments, Principal Garner. Additional comments from the group tonight. We've been here for just about an hour. We're going to be here till 7 o'clock for as long as we want to go. Yes, ma'am, I see you back there. We'll bring a microphone to you. If you would state your name.
Angie Stafford, Dyer County Schools. Most everything has probably been said, but I think just kind of to put a bow on it, I think the big thing is communication. You know, a lot of the things that are changing in high school, a lot of people don't even understand why, and a lot of that is because of what the federal's coming down. I understand that's a temporary Band-Aid. And so a lot of this talk is, you know, how long is that going to last? Because if there's not any communication, then as soon as this changes, then people remember changing again. But they don't understand why it's changed or why we're doing what we're doing right now. And so trying to come up with a plan, and I agree with everyone, that takes time, and get it right. Get it right. And what are we trying to do? You know, we say whole child, whole child. It should be the whole school, the whole school. Because what are we trying to do? And I think that's what you're trying to measure. And it is the growth. It is what are we important. You know, no one's even talked about the character that we put in. That is important, a part of what schools do. And that's not, you know, there's nowhere accountability for that. But there's more going on besides math and English, as important as those are, because that does develop the whole child. And I think just taking time and truly listening, and not rushing, because I know sometimes that we have to do that. I know that that's what's happening right now because it has to be done, and I understand that. But trying to come up with a plan where we're considering all of those things. And most people have said all those things, so there's no sense of me repeating those. But I think the communication is big, because I think a lot of people don't even understand right now what's happening in high school. Me being in that realm, I've had to dig into it. But like, why are they doing this? And then you understand, but I can tell you right now, I have to go back. None of our teachers understand that. They will not understand that until someone explains it to them.
Thank you very much for those comments, Ms. Stafford. Additional comments or questions? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Gerald, we're going to bring you a microphone over there, Director. If you wouldn't mind, state your name again and go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Norma Gerald, Paris Special School District Superintendent. As I've been thinking about some elementary measures, we spend so much time with RTI. It has been a push from the state. Our students are in constant assessment mode with RTI, and I think that could be a great measure of, again, are students growing? How many are getting out of RTI and or going through the phases? Am I going from level 3 to level 2 back to level 1? If we're putting that much time, energy, effort, and emphasis on it, then why not make it a part of, especially for an elementary school?
Thank you very much, ma'am. That was very thoughtful. Additional comments? Questions, considerations? I appreciate that we gave an example on elementary school. Yes, sir, we're going to bring you a microphone right down here. If you would state your name, go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Jeff Couples, Director of Schools, Weakley County. My big question is really just a question for you. I'd like to hear what the feedback from the other 5 meetings you've been in.
Yep.
To see what the rest of the state is saying, because I'm not hearing anything positive tonight, like saying, hey, label us another way.
Yes, sir.
So I would like to hear what the rest of the state is saying, and I do appreciate y'all listening to us and giving us an ear to speak our minds. But one thing, different comments have touched on it, but the coach in me knows how important culture is. And I know we're labeling academic success, and I'm all for all those things, but if a school is trying to improve and it comes out F, and now you're trying to build a culture in that locker room, aka that school, to perform better on the field or in the classroom, that's hard to do. So why add one more label? But really what I just like to know is what's the rest of the state thinking too, because I can see a trend in our comments.
Yes, consistent, I would say. I mean, we've heard a lot of consistency in the comments, even when you get down into the very specific components. We've talked about high school tonight as an example, and the one test component that we mentioned earlier, we've heard about that. We've had a lot of good, rich discussion about high school indicators. That seems to be something that has come up more frequently compared to middle school or elementary school indicators. What do you think about, those kind of readiness metrics or things that should be rewarded or represented in a letter grade system for elementary or middle? We haven't heard quite as much about that yet. We've heard about kind of this concept of comparing apples to apples, and are there ways to ensure that you are measuring schools that have similar student demographics and comparing across student demographics versus some other way to kind of slice or compare schools. We've heard a lot about CTE and readiness indicators. I mentioned that as part of the high school space. Trying to think through if there's anything else that have come out in some of the public town halls. I will also mention, and you'll see an email account up here in a minute, there are also public comments rolling in via email, and I have not been reading those as I've been on the road, but I will also let you know that there's additional mechanisms for people to submit comment in addition to these public town halls. I want to say when we were in Greenville last week, we heard a lot about some of the questions around the federal accountability model and what the federal government has approved or not approved, and when we expect they will approve something. And we have been coordinating with them for a number of months, and we will continue to do that until we get to the place we need to be. But that was a component that's come up a couple of times, and it's kind of the consistent with what we've heard. Again, it's like, which rating system are we talking about, and who's got control over that? Is it a state government thing or a federal government thing? So those are some examples, but we've heard a lot of consistency. Hope that helps. The other thing I will say, I mean, all of the comments that we get from this will be published so that everybody can go and look through and see exactly what they will, what has been said and what has been contributed to the discussion. So that'll be posted on the website as well. Two hands at the same time. All right, we're going to come to you, sir, and then we'll come back to you, ma'am. Mr. Black, go ahead when you're ready.
I have a question that didn't have a whole lot to do with what we've talked about tonight, except all this is accountability. Something that I know a lot of superintendents in here would like to know is, we're pushing a voucher program in this state that's going to be very troublesome to schools. What accountability is following that money now that's going to voucher schools? And I know that's not your business, but could you have the commissioner send me an email about the answer to that question? What accountability do they have?
Yes, sir. Happy to send you some more information about that. And you're right, there is an education savings account program that is legislated in our state. The one thing I can tell you, I know that those schools must participate in TCAP. So the students who are using an education savings account to follow their education will be taking that TCAP assessment. So that's one component I can tell you right away, but we'll follow up with additional information about any other accountability components that may or may not apply there. Yes, ma'am, I see you in the back. Please just state your name one more time.
Cheryl Mathis, Dyer County Schools. I'm afraid to even bring this up, but have you heard very much throughout these town hall meetings about third grade retention? Has there been much discussion about that? And if so, what has been?
A little bit.
Discussion, what?
A little bit. And I think we've heard about not only the difficulty around the kind of implementation of that particular legislation, but the comment I made earlier about tutoring and persistence through tutoring. We know one of the pathways to fourth grade promotion could be tutoring in their fourth grade year. In Memphis yesterday, one of the two town halls earlier this week, we heard about concerns that students will not persist through the entire year of tutoring. And if they do, as they would be required to for that promotion requirement, could we get a bonus point, or could that somehow be recognized in the system? So we've heard about that. But I would also say, I mean, Director Gerald made a comment a moment ago about RTI and some of the supports prior to that third grade milestone, and whether those should be rewarded or recognized in an A through F letter grade system. But if you've got something to say about it, I'd love to hear it.
Well, that's what I just wondered, what kind of feedback you've gotten on that, because it's been such a big deal in our school systems in our state, and I just wondered what kind of feedback was on that. And I'll also say that when we talked about the difficulty of getting teachers, I think we also have to, one thing popped into my mind about that is, as we evaluate principals, one of the things we have to talk about is, well, are you getting a diverse staff? And then we hear how difficult it is to find teachers, period, but then we have to score a principal on, are you getting diversity? We're just trying to find people. And being in the, you know, we don't live near University of Memphis. We don't live near MTSU or Knoxville. So we don't have as many of those applicants to choose from. And then as we have a harder and harder time finding teachers, we have to also think, a lot of us in this room are getting ready to retire before long, so we need some good candidates who will be good replacements for us. So administrators are also getting harder to find.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for those comments. I see your hand down here in the front. We'll bring a microphone to you. If you would state your name and go ahead and get started when you're ready.
My name is Lanita Click. I'm the principal at Dyersburg Intermediate School. We're a third grade through fifth grade school. And so I wanted to talk about some of the challenges of other state legislations on elementary schools. Third graders have to have 2 hours of reading every day, state mandated. Third graders have to have 90 minutes of math every day, state mandated. Third graders have to have physical activity every day, and that doesn't mean PE. They have to have PE every day. So all of those things between 8 and 3, it's hard to get it all in. And then when we're doing tutoring in reading, sometimes they need math also. What's left out? Science and social studies. They're included in our value-added score, in our growth score. But we don't worry about science and social studies too much because we got to teach them to read first. And so those things are important. Other things elementary school teachers are expected to do, communicate with parents. That takes time. And so the challenges of what's going on in elementary school sometimes are not just the grades and reading and math. That is our focus and our priority. But we're working on the whole child, and that's an expectation with elementary students. And so I just want that to be remembered and possibly considered.
Thank you very much, Ms. Click. I appreciate those comments. Getting in the elementary school space too. Thank you very much, ma'am. Others who would like to contribute tonight? Other thoughts or considerations? This is my teacher thinking time. I'm letting you have thinking time. We've been over here for just over an hour. My team will be here through 7 o'clock this evening, just in case there's anybody else who wants to come and tell us what they think. But maybe at this point in time, I'll do just kind of a last call for comments for folks in the room. All right. Well, listen, folks, thank you very, very much for coming out tonight and spending some time with us. I cannot give everybody in this room a car, but what we can give you is some treats from Miss Betsy. So please come get a bite. And thank you very much, Director Worley, for hosting us. Thank you for being here. We'll see you soon. Drive safe. I also completely forgot to tell y'all about this email. That is the email address. We're accepting emails through September 15th. Email us anytime, as much as you would like. Thank you, Kevin.